Hello, good morning. This is Dr. Iftikhar Ahmed Ansari, Department of Political Science, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. Friends, today I am going to talk about the concept of right in political science, and in politics the right carries one of the very essential tool to understand the relation between the individual and the state. The state, it claims authority over individual. But when the state is viewed as an instrument of society, it is essential that the authority of the state is made to depend on the function it performs. Now, in other words, when the state is regarded as a means and the individual is the end, and the state cannot be armed with absolute authority over individual, now if the state claims authority, individual must claim certain rights. Because individuals, they owe allegiance to the state and obey its commands, because the state serves their interest. Now, what does individual claim for the state in return for that obedience? Now, the answer to this question will elucidate the concept of rights. So, rights essentially belong to the sphere of conflicting claims between the individual and the state. So, any political theory which holds that an individual cannot have rights against the state is no theory of rights. So, it is important to note that the benefits which flows automatically from the existence of a state do not constitute rights. So, rights are not something the state which provides you in return for its presence in the form of different facilities. They are not the rights, because rights comes into the picture only when the authority of the state is sought to be limited. So, wherever the state is being limited by the individual, their own liberty, therein the concept of rights emerges. Right. So, by that virtue, rights are the necessary conditions for the personal, social and economic, political, mental and moral development of man, and rights are not only required for the development of man, but are necessary for the development of society and social values as well. So, rights are the social requirements of social man for the development of his personality and society at large. Thus, there are two aspects of right, the personal and the social. So, the rights of the individual are merely anti-social privileges if these are an hindrance to social development. So, rights have a social character and are given only to man living in society and working in the overall interests of society. So, the concept of right includes personal as well as social interest. Because of this, rights are given to the individual, and in the interest of the society, some reasonable restrictions are imposed thereupon. For example, each and every individual has been given a right to express his opinion by writing or spoken, by written or spoken words, but this does not mean that they can go on abusing each and everyone or use that language in public places and express their opinion through vulgar literature or paintings, etc. This goes against the value of a given society. So, rights cannot have an anti-social nature, because no right can be permitted to the individual at the cost of social well-being. Now, talking about the meaning, simply speaking, a right is to get one's due, that is, to get what is due to someone as a human, as a citizen, as an individual or as a member of a group, etc. So, to have a right then is to be entitled to do something and to have something done. For example, let us say to vote or to speak or to avail of health care, etc. It is different from obligation, as Hobbes points out. On any occasion, you have a choice whether or not to exercise your right. So, if you have a right, that simply means you have a choice. So, you are not obligated to do what you are entitled to do. That is, rights are your entitlements, and as a right, you have every freedom to stop practicing that right at your own will. For example, it is your right to vote, but you are not obliged to vote. You are free to exercise your choice. You may vote, you may not vote. So, while rights and obligations are not the same, they are still connected. So, whenever you decide to do what you have a right to do, others also have an obligation to let you do that. So, when you are observing your rights, others are also observing their rights, and their rights is to let you do the rightful claim that you have and that you are doing. So, rights are those conditions of social life without which man cannot be at his best or give of his best. So, what is needful to the adequate development and expression of his own personality? Now, looked at negatively, rights are those opportunities the absence of which deprives man of something very essential. So, a man without rights absolutely depends on the daily caprice of a superior authority is basically a slave. So, all doctrine of freedom therefore assumes the existence of rights, and Lasky has aptly said that every state is known by the rights that it maintains. So, rights are therefore, as Hobhouse puts it, what we may expect from others and others from us, and all genuine rights are conditions of social welfare. Now, the question arises, what are the justifications? What are those entitles, or what are those which entitles me to do something and obligates you to observe I doing that activity? Now, the right is conferred and correlative to obligations imposed by a law in a society in which we as our members are living. So, whose legal systems are both subjected, we both are subjected to. But all rights are not legal in nature. There are moral rights, for example, that right to look after the elder parents. Now, that is a moral right. This is something no one can force you to do. So, thus rights and their correlative obligations are essentially social in character. So, one has them as a member of a social group, be it a society or a nation. So, rights need recognition from society and from the state. So, rights therefore are claims which can be justified on legal, moral, ethical or human grounds. A right must be justified in the first place as something that we do as a member of some social group. Second, what I claim as a right must be something which is necessary for me, and if I am to play a proper part as a member. And thirdly, all my claim to have a right is justified only if I am able to and willing to respect the rights of other members of the group. So, these are the three conditions which are necessary to have a rights. So, it implies that every individual should be conscious of his own good, develop his power of action to realize it, and secondly, he must be conscious of the good of others and help in creating conditions which lead to the development of their power of action. Now, consciousness of this fact, namely that individual can be realized or individual goods can be realized in common with the goods of others, is the essence of the concept of right. Now, in this context, Lasky defines that rights are basically those conditions of social life without which no man can seek in general to be their best self. So, what we find is that the rights have dual phase. Rights express a certain kind of relationship between two parties. The one is right holder and the second one is right observer. So, rights having these two phases depend on whether they are viewed from a perspective of a holder of the right or from the perspective of the viewer of the right. So, from the standpoint of right holder, a right is permission to act. It is an entitlement to act and to exist, to enjoy and to demand. But from the standpoint of the right observer, the right usually imposes a correlative duty or obligation. Now, this duty can be either negative, that is not to interfere in the rights of others, the right holder, one who is exercising his right, or secondly, this could be in the nature of positive, that to assist that person who is exercising his right to exercise successfully. So, finally, to have a right entails certain responsibility. This is what is clarified so far. So, now these rights can be negative, can be positive, as we found in its justification and its dual phase, that is helping somebody or abstaining from helping. So, negative rights are rights that entail non-interference from the society at large. For example, right to liberty, right to life, right to property. Now, the right to life prevents others from killing me, but it does not obligate them to do anything positive to assist me in living my life to the full or to live happily. It is not an obligation on them to make me live happily, although I do have a right to life. Now, this is a negative right. Now, the positive rights are rights that impose certain obligations on other people or the state to do something for a fuller enjoyment of my own right. For example, the right to health or right to basic subsistence, etc. It requires the positive interference to do something, but negative rights restrict us from doing something. Negative rights entail only negative obligations of non-interference, and positive rights entail positive obligations on the part of the right observer to do something to assist in the right holder's exercise of the right. Now, on the basis of the discussion so far, if we talk about the features that rights have, so rights, they arise in society, they are the result of the social nature of man. Without society, there can be no rights. Now, every right has a corresponding obligation. That is the second thing we found out. So, my right is your duty and your right is my duty. So, rights and duties are the same thing, looked at different points of view. So, they are two sides of a same coin. They are correlative, they can never be separated. This can be beautifully expressed by one of the writers when he says, rights without duties are like men without shadows. They only exist in fairy tales. So, thirdly, right is not a claim. Now, a claim is selfish in nature as it affects the interest of a person or a number of persons. A right, on the other hand, is socially recognized, aimed at the good of all, and it has a social and moral end to serve. So, when I assert my rights, I do public duty as well, because I guarantee to others that I claim for what I claim for myself. Now, it follows that the rights must be compatible with the common good. So, society recognizes only those rights which in the last resort are relative to some common good or moral good. And then next is, the state does not create rights, it simply maintains and coordinates those rights which are socially recognized by giving such rights a legal sanction. So, the state ensures to everyone the enjoyment of his rights, as rights have an equalitarian basis. Then rights must be definite and precise, hence the necessity of defining them. Rights do not remain rights when every individual has his own separate claims. So, their claims need to be defined in precise manner. So, the rights have a tendency to grow as well. They must be consistent with the needs of man, and the needs of man always change. So, they expand, and so do rights. So, the dynamic nature of rights is manifested in its changing content. So, rights thus are claims that are socially recognized to make life happy, contented, harmonious, and therefore worth living. They are prior to state, as they fulfill the basic condition of social life. The state does not create them, it only recognizes, maintains and coordinates them so that all may realize the benefits of such rights, and in case of violation they protect them. So, it is the primary function of the state to ensure that all equally enjoy their rights and create those conditions without which man cannot develop their own powers which are inherent in them in the form of their capabilities. So, it involves equal opportunities for all. So, rights are a special kind of freedom as well, because they must be accorded to all man equally. Now, if some people are allowed to own property and others are not, or any right is given to some, not to others, that is not a right at all, that is a mere privilege. So, this chief characteristic of right is its egalitarian base. It is to be given equally to all members in a society, then only it will be called a right. So, when rights are formulated neither by the state nor by the individual, they may venture to surpass them, they command sanctity and accordingly are obeyed and enforced. Now, if we talk about the classification of rights, we find that rights are broadly divided into two, that is moral and legal rights. A moral right is that which is based on the ethical code of the morality of the people, that is what we think ought to be our right. It can expand, saying like over the field of conduct, and refers to all those actions and forbearances which is our moral duty to perform. But a moral right is not supported by the law of the state. Its sanction is the moral opinion of the community. Now, if there is a breach of moral right, there is nothing legally to punish the recalcitrant. So, a claim is called a right not because it is just, but because it has been recognized by the state and can be enforced by any legal process or through the court. So, whenever we talk of moral rights, we mean claims which are to be converted into rights only when they have been recognized by the state. So, moral claims, even when designated as moral rights, still lack the force to be enforced. So, it is my moral duty to help the poor, the needy and the sick, because as a moral agent of society, I must try to create conditions which may continue or contribute to the social good. But if I fail in my moral duty, laws of the state do not take cognizance of it. So, I must however remember that a moral right has a moral reference with it. It is recognized and sanctioned by society. Now, what is recognized and sanctioned by society must be sanctioned by laws of the state. So, no state, if it is really does serve its purpose, can long afford to ignore things which are sanctioned by society. If it does, the citizens have a moral right to revolt against the authority of the state. So, history tells us that the great reformers and leaders of the community, they had a battle against the unjust laws and traditions in order to lift men to a higher moral level. And Mahatma Gandhi's mission in life was to moralize man and society, and throughout his political career, first in Africa, South Africa and then in India, he stood arrayed against the tyranny of any kind, whether the tyranny was that of a state or that of an individual. So, with that we come to the legal right. Now, legal right on the other hand is recognized and maintained by the state of the land and is enforceable by a citizen in the court of law. So, both against the government and the other against the citizen. So, in simple words, legal rights are what in fact are our rights. These rights are distinguishable from moral rights. Secondly, the legal rights are uniform and open to all, irrespective of their caste, creed, religion. So, the truth of any legal statement depends ultimately on the acts of certain authorities. So, whatever is legal or illegal is so because it was declared so by legal authority. So, the ultimate touchstone therefore of all legal statements are the acts of these legal authorities. So, it is because courts have defined those defined terms in certain manner, whether they agree with or it agrees with the moral meaning is irrelevant. So, legal authorities use the term right, and when they use it, they refer to 4 different properties of a right, and that is the right that is the correlate to a legal duty, that is the claim. It is the absence of duty, that is the privilege or liberty, the capacity to change a legal relations, that is the power of that right, and the protection against change in one's legal position, that is the immunity that it enjoys because of having that right. So, it must however again emphasize that in democratic state of government is sensitive. In a democratic state, government is sensitive to the pressure of public opinion. And the legal and moral rights, they tend to harmonize and join the society. So, legal rights are further divided into 2, that is civil rights and political rights. That is what we come to now next. So, civil rights are the basic legal rights a person must possess in order to have a status of a citizen. So, civil rights are citizens' rights. So, they are the rights that constitute free and equal citizenship and include personal, political and economic rights. So, no contemporary thinker of any significance holds that such rights can be legitimately denied to a person on the basis of race, color, sex, religion, national origin or disability. So, civil rights provide for the fulfillment of certain elementary conditions of social life, that is the rights which relate to the protection and enjoyment of life and property by individuals. Now, without them, civilized life is not possible, and they are regarded as essential to the free and progressive life of man. So, their enjoyment is universally guaranteed because opportunities to all alike in the principle determining civil rights. So, civil rights include the right to life, freedom from arbitrary arrest, freedom to acquire and hold property, to speak, to write for publication or to meet publicly, to form associations for peaceful ends, to make contracts, etc. So a well-organized state must protect the civil rights of its people against encroachment by both individuals or the association of individuals or by state itself. Talking about political rights are not enjoyed by individuals in their personal or private capacity, but in their capacity as citizens alone, and they entitle them in the legal expression and administration of the sovereign power of the state. So political rights are means by which an adult citizen is entitled by the constitution and the laws of the state to participate in the affairs of the government of his country. So they consist in the right to vote and elect, the right to be elected, the right to hold public office, and so on. So it is through the exercise of political rights that democracy operates and functions, and it is only a democratic constitution which confers in absolute terms these rights on the people. Now, the classification between the civil and political rights is not strictly adhered to, as there are certain rights which fall in both categories. For example, it is now generally recognized that right to vote should belong to all adults, men and women. It was not given earlier to women, but now it has been. So then there are certain rights such as right to speech and assembly are often regarded as being at one's civil and political rights, but both civil and political rights, they aim to provide equal opportunity to all, and hence the distinction between the two becomes hazy. Yet these two-fold division has an important historical significance. So civil rights have existed and can exist even in those countries where political rights have been denied to the people. So political rights are the gifts of democracy and prerogative of the citizens of a democratic state. Now we come to the minority rights. Now these rights are considered the third generation of claims of people in 20th century. Now it has received considerable attention in recent years. It may broadly be termed as rights of cultural membership. Now these include the minorities, the language minorities and cultural minorities. They have a certain kind of right to sustain their scripts and maintain their culture, and the right of indigenous people also comes into that, to preserve their cultural institutions and practices and to exercise some measure of political autonomy. Now there is some overlap with the first generation rights, such as the right of religious liberty, but the right of cultural membership are broader and more controversial, and this is something which is guaranteed by the constitution of respective countries. And if it is not been guaranteed, then this is a right which is not observed often in its true sense, and minorities over the world and across the world are denied their right to maintain their cultural identity in the face of a majoritarian kind of society which is evolving in response to the 21st century challenges, especially economic challenges. Now finally, coming to the conclusion, we find that rights are meaningless outside the organized society, because apart from communal life, they are hopeless abstractions. If there is no society, there can be no rights. So recognition of this fact is the very basis of rights. Of our rights are the duties of others towards us, and the rights are the duties of others towards us, and their rights are our duties towards them. And in the word of Hobhouse, once again, the rights and duties then are the conditions of social welfare, or as we define such, welfare of a life of harmony to this welfare. So every member of the community stands in a double relation. He has his share in it. So a right, thus understood, is an essential condition of individual's self-development, and it is also a condition of social welfare. In the words of Bosanq, what we can conclude saying that we have a right to the means that are necessary to the development of our lives in the direction of the highest good of the community of which we are a part. So this right is recognized and sanctioned by society. So with that, I come to end of my presentation for today on the concept of right, its meaning, its justification, its classification, and its different perspective. That is, its classification in the form of minority rights, political rights, civil rights, legal rights, moral rights. So thanks for being part of this presentation. Thank you.